Welcome to Reality Theory, episode 13, the USA and Nazis from the cocaine coup to the Ukraine coup. Now, the cocaine coup happened in 1980, and it was done with the backing of Roberto Suarez, who people might know as the Sosa from Scarface. He's the character who inspired Sosa from Scarface. So Roberto Suarez had a cocaine coup in 1980, and one of his backers, one of his right-hand men in the coup was a man by the name of Klaus Barbie, who was a Nazi, known as the Butcher of Lyon. And he helped out the CIA and Roberto Suarez in this cocaine coup. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, because there were also Nazis involved in the Ukraine coup, and this is back in the news because the New York Times is kind of trying to white supremacist wash these white supremacists, neo-Nazis in the Ukraine. Is pretty obvious they are who they are. So why is the CIA supporting Nazis, or the USA supporting Nazis? Why were they doing it back in 1980, and why are they doing it now in the Ukraine? So let's take a look. Let's take a look at this Azov Brigade. These guys are scary. These guys look like Nazis, they smell like Nazis, and they talk like Nazis. But some people try and tell me they're not Nazis. Maybe neo-Nazis, they're, moderate Nazis. I'm not even sure. So let's take a look at the Azov Brigade. So here they are, and see, they spark a lot of fear. Now, these guys are definitely sick MFers. They're not only a militia, they're also a police force and a political party. The Ukrainian army kind of brought them in. They got their start in the 2014 coup, in which they kicked out the Russian supporting president. And since then, they've had a major role in the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian community as a whole. So they look up to the Ukrainians who worked with the Nazis. So all the Ukrainian collaborators, a man by the name of Stefan Bandar, he's a big hero to these guys, and he fought against the communists, but he fought with the Nazis. If you look at a lot of their insignias, their flags, they look very Nazi-esque. They were originally banned by Facebook. Now they're not, which is very weird because once the war started, they stopped being banned by Facebook. But before the war, they were considered like the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups. But after the war, now they're kind of needed by the American forces. Now they're not white supremacists for anymore. Now, they have a very scary leader. Their leader is sick, man. His name is Andrei Biletsky, and he's an avowed white supremacist. He's not going to tell you he's not. He's known as the White Leader. That's his name. And he put out a book called Words from the White Leader, which is very mind-comfy to me. Very kind of white supremacist manifesto. All right. Some of his racist quotes include, "The goal of the Ukraine is to prepare for further expansion, to struggle for the liberation of the entire white race from the domination of the international speculative capital." There's another quote where they say the Semite-led subhumans, and so he basically means this is our white supremacist philosophy, is that the evil Jews are leading all the subhuman humans, I guess. I don't know what you call them, like Africans, Asians, Chinese, Latinos. So he believes that there is a war going on in which the evil Jews are controlling the subhuman blacks, Latinos, Indians, whatever, and he needs to get rid of them. So he also tried to pass a law when he was essentially like Speaker of the House. Like, he was not only a white supremacist militia leader, he's also like a politician, and he was a pretty powerful politician. And he wanted to have a law that would ban race mixing, saying that he wanted to punish severely sexual perversions and any interracial contacts that led to the extinction of the white man. And he's also responsible for these riots on a Roma minority group. You might not have heard of them, but they were also oppressed by the Nazis, and they're a minority group that lives in the Ukraine. They've been there forever. They're not unnative to the Ukraine. They're not immigrants. But he leads these kind of crazy riots against them in their businesses, and they're called pogroms. And this goes back to the Nazi era. Like, a famous pogrom was Kristallnacht, when they destroyed all the Jewish businesses. And right now we have a Ukrainian who's doing the same thing, but not to Jewish people, but to the Roma minority. A spokesman for the Azov Brigade said only 10 to 20% of the brigade were Nazis. Now, that's a very big number that they're admitting to, and you have to think, if that's what they're admitting to, how much is it really? But let's take them at face value. 20% of this group is Nazis. So that means the other 80% has to be somewhat cool with Nazism, Nazi sympathizers. Nazis aren't that bad if they're going to work in a unit that is 20% Nazi. Now imagine if you had an Arab fighting force and they said, hey, we're only 20% Al Qaeda, only 20%. Or if you had a Mexican fighting force says, hey, we're only 20% Sinaloa cartel. The rest of these people are not in the Sinaloa cartel. They sympathize with the Sinaloa cartel, but they're not in it. So that's very dangerous to have a unit that is 20% Nazi. Main retort of the Nazi is accusation when someone saying, hey, there's Nazis in the Ukraine and they're fighting against the Russians, they'll say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Zelensky's Jewish. How can Nazis be fighting with a Jewish leader? It happens. Politics and war meet strange bedfellows. So one of the reasons that they do work together is this oligarch friend that we have, Kolinsky. Let's go back, reload it. So this guy, Igor Kolomoisky, he not only supported Zelensky, the president, but he also supported the Azov Brigade. Now, Kolomoisky is also Jewish, and he's also a big supporter of Jewish causes such as Shabbat and Ukraine. So why do we have a big Jewish billionaire who has been compared to a Bond villain called a mafia leader, a warlord? Like was the power in the Ukraine, not anymore, but he was the power behind Zelensky and also the Azov Brigade. So why is this guy donating millions of dollars to white supremacists? And I guess it's the old axiom, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And because the Azov Brigade is enemies to the Russians, they are friends to the Jewish people like Kolomoisky and Zelensky. It looks like Azov Brigade is very racist, very homophobic, very Nazi, but they keep their anti-Semitism on the low, I guess. They don't ransack Jewish villages like they do Roma villages, and they don't attack Jews like they do Black immigrants or Indian immigrants, South Asian immigrants. So I guess they're okay if they leave the Jews alone, if they just keep the rest of the Nazism. So this crazy media tycoon supports not only Azov Brigade, Zelensky, but he has like the big TV station that actually gave birth to Zelensky. He owns gas. He actually even owned a part of Burisma, which employed Hunter Biden. And he was a central figure in the Donald Trump impeachment. Like Rudy Giuliani, when he wanted to meet Zelensky, he went to Kolomoisky first. So who's the boss? Who's the boss? If he didn't go to Zelensky, he went to Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky told everyone that that Giuliani was looking for dirt, and that's what kind of led to Donald Trump's impeachment trial. So this is not the first time you've had Israel or Jewish people working with people who are antithetical to their beliefs or even racist against them. We've seen in Syria a large amount of Islamic rebels have been supported by Israel. Why is Israel, who has been at a clash of civilizations with Islam since its founding, why are they supporting Islamic rebels? Because these Islamic rebels are not Hezbollah. They're not bothering Israel. They are rebels in Syria. So these are the rebels who became ISIS, etc. So Israel supporting these quote unquote Syrian moderate Islamic rebels who are kind of, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as them supporting white supremacists. You support your enemy's enemy so you can get at your enemy. And I guess they don't really care too much. So this brigade, it was founded and got its start in 2014 when Kolomoisky became the governor of the region next to Russia, and he kind of had to fight off the Russian forces. Now, the Ukrainian army was not too strong, so they needed these militias who were founded by the Ukrainian oligarchs, and a lot of these militias were white supremacists, criminals, street thugs, etc. Now, this is been going on for a very long time. For those familiar with the history of Nazis and the USA and the CIA, you probably know that a lot of Americans supported the Nazis or rallies for the Nazis here in the 30s. You had people like Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's father, George W. Bush's grandfather, recently passed away. He was Prescott Bush was a big supporter of the Nazis, as was Allen Dulles, who went on, and these were financially supported. They did business with the Nazis. And so what happened was, after World War II, people like Allen Dulles, who would go on to be director of the CIA, he was in the OSS at that time, which is the predecessor to the CIA. He would meet people like Richard Gehlen. Now, Richard Gehlen was Hitler's chief of intelligence for Eastern Europe. So real big CIA, Gestapo type guy. And he was recruited by Allen Dulles because he had a lot of information on the Russians. And now the World War II is over. Now the Cold War is starting. Now America needs to have forces against the Russians. So they recruit all these Nazis who had been fighting the Russians for World War II, had intel in Eastern Europe, had previously occupied Eastern Europe, and did not like communism. So this is definitely an unholy alliance. Started with Richard Galen and then spread to other evil people such as Klaus Barbie. Now, Klaus Barbie was known as the Butcher of Lyon, which is a place in France. So he killed, estimates are 4,000 people killed, and sent 14,000 people to concentration camps. So this guy was a serious sicko. If you see it in Glorious Bastards, Hans Benda, the main evil Nazi, he's based on Klaus Barbie. He's a real evil guy, and he was actually brought to the USA by the help of the CIC, which became the CIA. So the CIA, or its predecessor, protected Klaus Barbie while he was in Europe, while the French were looking for him, while the Israelis were looking for him, while the Germans were looking for him. They protected him. And then when the heat got hot, they moved him to Bolivia. Why they moved him to Bolivia? Was it just to escape? I don't think so. I think they moved him to Bolivia so he could become an agent in Bolivia and do the same Nazi tactics in Bolivia that he was doing in France. But this time, instead of doing it against Jews and communists, now it's just communists and Indo-Hispanic Americans, or Native Hispanic Americans. During World War II, Barbie was sent to France and he set up shop in the Hotel Terminus. So this is where he was doing all this horrible stuff to the French Jews, resistance fighters, killed 45 orphans, and he was rewarded the Iron Cross by Hitler himself. And again, we are familiar with Operation Paperclip, which brought together the Nazi scientists like Herder von Braun, who they say got the man on the moon, and all sorts of other, scientists. And one could say, hey, these guys are scientists. They weren't ideologues. They were just doing their job. They got hired by Nazis. But the other people, the intelligence people, the Klaus Barbies, and another horrible person is Josef Mengele. Now, Mengele is known as the angel of death and the kind of architect of Auschwitz, which was one of the most horrible concentration camps. And he also got help from the Americans to flee Europe to go to South America. He actually went to Paraguay, and in Paraguay, he was under the protection of Adolfo Stroessner, who was a right-wing anti-communist dictator and a strong ally of the United States. So an ally of the United States was protecting enemy of France, an enemy of Israel, an enemy, you would say, of humanity. This guy is like, it's pretty much the same thing if Israel was harboring Osama bin Laden and they didn't tell the USA about it. So USA is harboring these people, Mengele, Klaus Barbie, these war criminals from the Israelis, from the French, from the Germans, from the world, and they're actually using them for nefarious purposes. Both Mengele and Klaus Barbie were accused of being involved in a drug trade in South America. So how they got out of there was a rat line, and this rat line combined CIA and intelligence assets, and combined the Vatican and the Red Cross. And these organizations managed to provide false passports and false identities and secure routes for these Nazis to flee Europe without persecution. So when Klaus Barbie he actually joined the Bolivian army as a kind of intelligence agent, and he would do the same stuff he did in Nazi Germany, torturing, assassinating, kidnapping people. Bolivians would be kidnapped, tortured, even castrated by Barbie and his neo-Nazi underlings. And this was part of something called Operation Condor, which combined all the right-wing dictatorships of South America that were all installed by the USA, and all their intelligence agents trained by the USA, and basically a CIA-backed operation of right-wing dictatorships who would use their intelligence agents to assassinate, kill, interrogate, torture, and do all sorts of horrible things. There's a lot about it in my book, Inside the CIA's Secret War in Jamaica. It included terrorisms, assassinations, even in the United States. If you remember the scene in Scarface where the diplomat gets blown up on Embassy Row or by the United Nations, it's actually based on something that came out of Operation Condor, where these Cuban ex-CIA agents blew up a critic of Chile. So yeah, Operation Condor, horrible, evil assassinations. Augusto Pinochet was a part of it. He was a horrible right-wing dictatorship. And all these people had a couple of things in common. One was cocaine. Another was Nazis. So there was a lot of Nazis in South America. A lot of these Nazis were supporting these right-wing fascist regimes and doing their same old anti-communist chasing. There's not too many Jews in South America, so they weren't chasing too many Jews, but they were definitely killing a lot of communists and a lot of native Latin Americans. Barbie would also bring Nazi party ideology to Bolivia, giving lectures to soldiers by candlelight under a swastika. He would try and escape persecution. He would even travel to France and Germany. He's traveling to France and Germany while he's being wanted by Israel, France. So what happened was, when the leftist party, he was protected by this General Hugo Banzer, who was, again, an aide to the USA, super right-wing, partial to Nazism, very anti-communist, but he actually lost power in 1978 due to election. And what happened here, now Barbie's out of power. He has to worry about maybe the French going for him. So he organized what they call the cocaine coup. Remember, the title of this is USA and Nazis from the cocaine coup to the Ukraine coup. So this American-supported Nazi starts a coup with this drug dealer, Roberto Suarez. Going back to Scarface again, he is the Sosa character in Scarface, the big drug dealer, bigger than Escobar. Apparently, Klaus Barbie even met Escobar too, on a number of books. So now what's happening is Klaus Barbie is now killing all the anti-fascist, anti-Nazi people who are opposing him in the drug game. So a group that he had were called the Fiancés of Death. And these were guys like the neo-Nazi all-stars from all over Europe. You had Spanish terrorists, Ernesto Mia, the fascist Italian terrorist, Stefano de Chal, and they would wear swastika armbands and chant Hail Hitler. So these guys were not hiding their Nazism at all, and they brought into a regime that was favorable to the US. So a lot of similarities between Josef Mengele and Klaus Barbie. As I mentioned before, both of them escaped on the rat line. Both of them were in custody of the American government. And there was a document that got leaked that said the CIA was aware in the 1960s and 70s that Josef Mengele, the angel of death, the architect of Auschwitz, who's really one of the sickest, most sadistic people you ever hear about in your life, was being protected by an American ally, Adolfo Stroessner, who was the right-wing dictator of Paraguay. Sorry about that. So that's some of Klaus Barbie in Bolivia. As Barbie's escape gained notoriety in the 1980s, the CIA took a detailed examination of whether U.S. government agencies might be indirectly linked to Barbie. So this is again, I don't know if you're familiar with the famous article, the CIA finds no connection between themselves and the drug trade. So the CIA was asked to look at their connection between themselves and Nazis. And it was so bad, they had to admit that, yeah, Klaus Barbie was working for Bolivian intelligence, and Bolivian intelligence worked on for us, and Klaus Barbie would pass on intelligence that got to us. And also, Klaus Barbie helped the USA kill Che Guevara. Very interesting. So they had to know where he is, or else they're the most incompetent agency in the world. So the CIA knew that the notorious Nazi war crime was involved in the drug trade, which they did in terms of Mengele. They knew Mengele was involved in the drug trade. They did not let Israel know. They did not let Germany know. They did not try and capture him. They let him be involved in the drug trade, and they let him be protected by their ally, Stroessner, effectively protecting him, right, as they had protected Klaus Barbie. And again, this all goes back to Operation Condor. So this is some crazy stuff right here. That they say that Mengele was involved in MK Ultra. So not only did he flee Germany to come to South America, but there's a lot of reports he was in Quebec. There are a lot of reports he was in the United States working with fellow MK Ultra CIA doctors. So let's look at a couple of them. A former labor attorney for Atlantic Richfield Co., David Rosenbaum, conducted a 9-year investigation concerning allegations of physical torture and coercive conditioning of numerous employees at an Arco plant in Monaca, Pennsylvania. His clients, Jerry L. Doty and Ann White, were victims of radiation exposure, but as Mr. Rosenbaum probed deeper in the subsequent interview sessions. A Pandora's box was unveiled. His most astonishing conclusion was that Jerry Doty and Ann White were most likely the offspring of Adolf Hitler, based in part on the uncanny resemblance from photos, facial features, bone structure, and size are taken into consideration. Rosenbaum also said that we both exhibit feelings and experience that indicate they're twins. Now, one thing about Mengele is he was obsessed with twins. Like he loved the Holocaust because he could experiment on all these poor Jewish twins who were brought to him, triplets. He loved identical twins. So he was really all about doing like experiments on human beings, torturing, and just finding perverted sick science by torturing and experimenting on human beings. So he was a real sicko. And twins was one of his obsessions. There's a town in South America that is like 90% twins, and they say that's all because of Mengele's experiments that he was doing down there. Doty and White were allegedly subjected to torture and many times while under drug-induced hypnosis, with each one going at least 3 training techniques by plant physicians. Each victim was trained to enter a hypnotic state under the occurrence of specific stimuli, usually involving a cue, word, or phrase trained to remember or forget what transpired in the hypnotic state. They were repeatedly subjected to identical stimulus response sequence to produce nearly automatic reactions to the particular status. MK Ultra veteran Dr. Bernard Diamond, Dr. Martin One, and Dr. Josef Mengele regularly visited the Arco plant. So these are all CIA MK Ultra doctors. CIA knew he was in Paraguay. Maybe they also knew more about it. They never tried to get him. Why not? You think it would be a big win for the CIA? Say, hey, we captured this notorious criminal. We gave him to the Israelis. We are the heroes of the world, right? But no, the CIA is not trying to be the heroes of the world, even for PR purposes. They're not trying to say, we captured Josef Mengele, we captured Klaus Barbie. Neither the Mengele never was caught. Klaus Barbie was captured by the French, not even the Mossad. Mossad had to stand down. Mossad stopped chasing Klaus Barbie. Why? Did the CIA tell them to? Klaus Barbie even said he was around Mossad agents while he was involved in the drug trade in Europe. They knew who he was and they didn't do anything about him because they were all on a common mission. So this is all crazy. All right, so that's not the only connection that Mengele has been to MK Ultra. Like, there's a lot, man. There's I'm not gonna do them all, but I'm gonna do a few. So there's a woman by the name of Frida Holiday, and she said she was a human slave and victim of the CIA's MK Ultra program. She says, my twin sister and I, it's a very much a common theme of twins, we're experimenting at Stanford Research Institute in their program called MK Ultra, conducting CIA-sponsored trauma-based mind control experiments. 80 major universities and institutions were involved in these experiments during the Cold War. My sister and I were locked up at Stanford for 6 solid months of each year for the first 7 years of our life. The purpose of the trauma and torture was to break our minds and see if they could induce disassociation and multiple personalities. Then their intent was to program each part to do things they wanted you to do, and we were trafficked sexually. It's all very crazy. If you read about MK Ultra, it sounds kind of in line. Frida recently met another victim of SRI, she says. He was drugged and tortured from SRI from 1957 to 1969. He remembers Josef Mengele being there as well. So this is an American institute. Josef Mengele is there with MK Ultra CIA doctors conducting experiments according to at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. In the matter of Josef Mengele, a 1992 reports on Mengele's whereabouts during the Holocaust needs to be revisited and updated in light of this new evidence. The report states, because of his highly visible and significant role in Hitler's regime and a homicidal reign of terror, Mengele effectively became a symbol of the Holocaust. In particular, his name became synonymous with the evil of Auschwitz, the site which more people were murdered than in other recorded human history. All right, so here's another article, Josef Mengele's part in CIA trauma brainwashing, from Ann Diamond. She actually has a whole book on MK Ultra. You know, I recommend people read it. Mengele came to Argentina, courtesy of the Vatican rat line in 1947, after the Americans allowed him to stay, after they captured him in Germany in 1945. Alan Dulles, who was Catholic, may have helped sponsor him. The Mengele biographies were both written by CIA hacks. One is Gerald Posner, I have it, and he was actually anti-Mengele I think the CIA, and he was anti-Mengele, anti-CIA, and then I think he must have been compromised by the CIA because they let him read the files, and then he wrote a book which didn't bring up any of like the narco trafficking, nothing on Klaus Barbie, nothing on the CIA spreading Nazis, and then since then, Gerald Posner has been a big CIA hack. So I don't know who the other one is, but that one is definitely Gerald Posner, who allowed access to the classified files at headquarters. At one point, the CIA said it had over 1 million pages on him, including his diaries and autobiography, all classified. A fraction of these pages were released in 2004. So many people knew he had worked for the CIA that the agency had a disclaimer on its website denying this. So this is, again, the agency finds no connection between itself and the crack trade. One of the forensic scientists, Dr. Levine, who identified Mengele, okay, who cares about him? Sarah in Minnesota wrote at Macau's site, at best I can ascertain, I was born in 1959, one of 5 identical girls, again, identical twins, this is what Mengele likes. Triplets, quadruplets, the better. He's obsessed with experimenting on these poor people and torturing them. My mother was given a false psychiatric diagnosis by the Mayo Clinic so that we could be confiscated and placed in separate homes. I was placed with a vile, very exceedingly child pornographer, JMP. I was born in the US, but spent my better part of my first 3 or 4 years globe hopping with Mengele. English was not my first language. Mengele et al. Tortured me many times in many locations. I have heard mentioned by other MK Ultra survivors, including several hospitals here in the US and on military bases. The tortures included were not limited to rapes, disjointing, killing animals, and other children in front of me or being forced to watch as adults were tortured, electric shock injections with LSD and anectidine, and many other substances, cattle prod up the vagina or rectum. So this is some sick, torturous people, and it goes in line with what Mengele was doing in Nazi Germany. Witness murders, occult rituals, many bizarre sex acts. It was very calculated and continues to the present. All of these people are government sanctioned in their actions. There is no safety I have found except in the Lord. So all of this, man, all this stuff on Mengele being involved in MK Ultra. So when I hear that the USA is not supporting Nazis in Ukraine, it's like how they said they were supporting the moderate rebels in Syria. And this is even something that Alan Dulles said. He was saying, yeah, I'm supporting the Nazis, but I'm supporting the moderate Nazis. So I guess the moderate Nazis only want like half a Holocaust, or they might want to take out all the minorities except for the Jews. So that makes them okay, I guess, for the State Department, CIA, who were supporting these guys. But this is a long history of America supporting Nazis, and it's not because America is anti-Semitic or wants to kill Jewish people or necessarily the people in power have any type of Nazi ideology. It's the fact that they're so anti-communist that they will use anybody. They'll use narco traffickers, Islamic extremists, Nazis, anyone, because these people have no moral compass and they know war is big business. And they use evil people for their war. So wake up, people. Don't believe the New York Times. The Nazi people might be overblowing it. There's not maybe a whole not Nazi state, but a very significant Nazi state. And if you look at the treatment of Indian and African immigrants in the Ukraine by the Azov Brigade and by everybody, basically, you get the sense that the Ukraine has a racist problem. I've met a lot of Ukrainians and who are nice people, not racist at all. I'm not going to say it's a totally racist country, but like America, they have a big racism problem, and America is actually blowing up their racist problem by giving money to the Azov Brigade and blowing up their racist philosophy and increasing it. So watch the news, man. War is big business. Don't let these people lie to you, man. They support Nazis. There are Nazis in the Ukraine. The CIA has been supporting Nazis, and they will until we call them out and expose them. So I like to see all my Jewish brothers and sisters who nobly fight against anti-Semitism to ask the American government to stop supporting the Azov Brigade and also to release all the files on Mengele and Klaus Barbie and make an apology to the Jewish people and the French people for harboring these horrible war criminals. I don't get it. Like, if I was Israel, I would go to war with America for harboring those criminals. Because America would go to war. Like America specifically says, if you're harboring war criminals, we're going to kill you. Like, that's why they invaded Afghanistan. That's why they had their war on terror, because Osama bin Laden was being harbored. Yet America harbored 2 of the worst bin Ladens from the Nazi regime. and felt no repercussions. So that's Reality Theory, episode 13. The Nazis in the USA, from the cocaine coup to the Ukraine coup. From the cocaine coup to the Ukraine coup. All right. I'm glad I didn't misspeak in the beginning, just to the end. But thanks for sticking with me, man. Like, subscribe, share, man. I'm bringing y'all some real cool information. I'm gonna get a better setup soon. Get out the closet. I already got a better mic. So I'm reading the feedback and the criticism, and I feel for y'all. I wish I had more money for a better setup, but right now I'm just giving y'all the best information I can possible, and I hope you appreciate it.